This presentation summarizes the ideas of various resources, including Chapter 7 of Pang's Diversity and Equity in the Classroom. I want to present these ideas so that we further understand gender identity, sexual orientation, and what we can do to ensure our LGBTQ students feel safe and accepted in our classrooms. I want to present some terms that we may not know because it is important to understand them. LGBTQ stands for lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, and queer or questioning. Queer can be used as more of a general term addressing the continuum of sexual orientation, or it can refer to someone who is questioning their heterosexuality. Sexual orientation is the sex of those to whom one is sexually and romantically attracted. So categories here have typically included attraction to members of one's own sex, which is gay or lesbian, attraction to members of the other sex, which would be heterosexual, and attraction to members of both sexes, which is bisexual. Sex refers to a person's biological status, so this would be what the doctor says that person is when they are born. A person's gender identity might not be consistent with their biological sex. So someone who is transgender is someone whose internal gender identity does not collaborate with their biological sex. These labels, however, might not be fully accurate for someone, so this shows the importance of not using labels and just accepting others for who they are and not focusing on this aspect of their life. So let's talk about culture for a moment. The LGBTQ community can be considered a cultural group with their own language, history, role models, values, customs, and beliefs. To be truly culturally relevant, we must include all cultures, so we should work to understand, accept, and include this culture in our classrooms, just like we would any other culture. We can use Ramon Valle's model of culture to see that students identifying as LGBTQ are members of their own subculture. In Level 1 are the aspects of culture that can be seen or heard, such as what people wear or the language that they speak. For example, marching in a pride parade and using rainbows as a symbol for inclusion of the diversity in this culture. Level 2 involves the interactional patterns and behaviors. Now that same-sex marriage is legal, those who do get married have their own traditions and ways of celebrating their marriage, such as not walking down the aisle. And Level 3 are the values that are important to LGBTQ individuals. Equality, civil rights, and freedom are all very important and many have participated in riots and protests to fight for these values for members of this culture. These are some of the events that happened in LGBTQ history. We need to talk about including these in our lessons, just like we strive to include the history of other cultural groups. The first gay rights organization, the Society for Human Rights, was established in 1924 by Henry Gerber. In 1950, the Mattachine Society is founded to fight for discrimination and prejudice towards gays. In 1966, the first transgender organization is established in San Francisco. In 1969, the New York police raids a gay bar. Due to the harassment, there were riots for 3 days following the event. This is considered one of the most important events and the start of the LGBTQ movement. In 1970, the first Pride Parade is held in New York City. In 2000, Vermont legislature voted for the first civil union law in the United States. In 2015, 37 states, including California, recognized same-sex marriage, and the U.S. Supreme Court ruled same-sex marriage as a constitutional right. It is important to understand that sexual identity and gender identity are not the same. Sex is about biology, physical body parts, and chromosomes. As defined by the American Psychological Association, gender refers to one's sense of oneself as being male, female, or transgender. When someone's biological sex and gender identity do not match, they might consider themselves as transgender. Normally, the idea of gender has been socially constructed around body parts. These social constructions are strong. For example, things that are pink are considered for girls and blue for boys. This can pressure children and teens into gender roles that might be different from their gender identities. So, coming out is the process in which one acknowledges and accepts one's own sexual orientation. It can also be disclosing one's sexual orientation to others. And the term closeted refers to a state of secrecy or cautious privacy regarding one's sexual orientation. For many LGBTQ teens, coming out can be difficult because they think they will be looked down upon or feel shame. Our LGBTQ students face fear and sometimes danger in our schools. For example, there's the fear of being rejected, unequal treatment, lack of respect, feeling peer pressure, facing expectations of normal. And this is all during a time where adolescence is already difficult enough. So our students need our support. Research shows that gay men in their early 20s are more likely to struggle with depression, addiction, and suicide. So this emphasizes the importance for supporting our students when they are teens and when they're still trying to figure their identity out, so that they don't face these dangers in the future. Vivian Cass models the psychological changes a person goes through in their identity process. It is important to note that not everyone experiences these stages. The first stage is identity confusion, in which the person might start to realize that their feelings, behaviors, and thoughts may be gay in nature. The next is identity comparison, where they begin to seek others who are lesbian, gay, or bisexual for some type of support. Stage 3 is identity tolerance, where a person realizes and tolerates that they are gay, lesbian, or bisexual, but they might maintain two separate images where they are gay in the gay community but heterosexual in public. Next is the identity acceptance stage, where the individual slowly accepts their identity, but in some contexts still pretends to be heterosexual. The stage of identity pride involves being proud of who they are as gay, lesbian, or bisexual. However, they might have some sort of hate for the heterosexual community. So those in the stage of identity synthesis are at peace not just with their identity, but with heterosexual groups. Many LGBTQ students are bullied, and sometimes school officials and teachers don't do anything about it. Bullying may be due to homophobia or simply because the students do not have compassion or empathy. Homophobia is the fear of gay, lesbian, bisexual, transgender, and queer people. This shows the importance to not only check our own biases and work to protect our LGBTQ students, but to ask ourselves what we can do to teach others to be compassionate. There is a lot of data that shows that our LGBTQ students are not safe in our schools. Here are just a few examples. 71.4% of LGBTQ students have been verbally harassed. 51.4% of LGBTQ students have heard teachers make homophobic remarks. 55.5% of LGBTQ students have heard teachers make negative remarks about gender expression. And 55.5% of LGBTQ students did not feel safe at school because of sexual orientation. We need a plan to deal with bullying and harassment so that we are prepared to handle these situations. These strategies are provided by the Gay, Lesbian, and Straight Education Network, allowing students to form clubs such as a Gay-Straight Alliance so that students can discuss issues in a safe place. Incorporating LGBTQ history and positive role models in the curriculum so that students feel accepted and so that other students also learn the importance of this culture. We must be supportive of our LGBTQ students. When our students begin to feel safe, they will want to come to school. We also need to create a more respectful environment by having specific policies against bullying due to sexual orientation and gender identity. Here are some other strategies for inclusivity. Not using male-female lines, for example, when entering the classroom or lining up to use the restroom. Using a variety of gender role models. Having a king and king or queen and queen for homecoming court. Reviewing curriculum for heterosexual bias. Challenging gender identity name-calling. And including discussion of LGBTQ issues in sex education. It's important to use role models in the curriculum. Here are some examples. James Baldwin was a novelist and civil rights activist who fought against discrimination against African Americans and also included gay characters in his works. Harvey Milk was an openly gay politician who fought for LGBTQ civil rights and established the Castro Village Association. Barbara Deming wrote stories about being lesbian and fought for the rights of African Americans, gays, and lesbians. Some more role models specifically from the LGBTQ community are the poet Emily Dickinson, Josephine Baker, who is a dancer and actor, and the Italian painter and sculptor Michelangelo. And then here I have a picture of Lady Gaga, who is a bisexual singer. So we ask ourselves, what can we do? The reality is that our students are figuring out their interests in others, just like they are figuring out their interests in various sports, music genres, topics of study, and that's okay. So here are some other reminders for ensuring that you are inclusive and supportive of LGBTQ students. Check your own bias. Do not ignore bullying and harassment. Stop homophobic or transphobic language. Be mindful of the terms you use and use the correct pronouns that students have chosen. Be someone your students can trust, and if a student has trusted you and come out to you, do not betray that trust and be careful as they might not have come out to their parents yet. Include discussions about gender identity and LGBTQ role models in our curriculum. We should not treat our students differently because of their sexual orientation or chosen gender identity. The Gay, Lesbian, and Straight Education Network suggests that students, teachers, parents, and community members take the Ally Pledge, which states, "I believe all students, regardless of sexual orientation or gender identity expression, deserve to feel safe and supported." That means I pledge to not use anti-LGBTQ language or slurs, intervene if I safely can in situations where students are being harassed, or tell an adult, support efforts to end bullying and harassment, and encourage others to be allies.